We are the ship, seventh inning. Good exhibitions, the Negro Leagues versus the White Leagues. When we played head to head, it was nip and tuck. They won some, and we won some. Gene Benson, outfielder for the Philadelphia Stars. Our season started in the spring and ended in September. We played more than 100 games a season and then played winter ball in Cuba or Mexico. In between, we traveled all over the country, playing all kinds of teams black, white, Latin, pro, and semi pro. Some Negro Leaguers even barnstormed in Canada and Asia. But most games were played in the United States. In many places, we wouldn't see a black face for miles around. The home team would supply the umpires, usually the town sheriff or somebody like that. The winner would get 60% of the gate and the loser 40. If we tied, we'd split it even down the middle. They did their best to keep us from winning, sometimes dragging the game out until it was too dark to play to force a tie. We had more ties than anything. We couldn't we could have beaten most of those teams with our hands behind our backs, but we would get robbed. The umpires would call us out when we were safe, and everything was a strike, no matter where it was pitched. You'd have thought all of their pitchers were named Satchel Paige. We had to learn to hit bad pitches. The Brooklyn Bushwicks used to freeze the balls before the game, took the life out of them. When we hit them, they wouldn't go very far. Sometimes we would get them too. There was a catcher, Chappie Gray, who used to catch Satchel when he was in his prime. One time they were playing in Enid, Oklahoma. By the time the game got up into late innings, it started to get kind of dark. So Chappie told Satchel, "Hey Satchel, you got two strikes on this batter? Man, you throwing the ball so hard, I can't see it too well, and I don't want to break my finger. I'll tell you what to do. You wind up like you are going to throw the ball, and I'll hit my fist in my mitt. Make it sound like it's the ball. Man, nobody will know the difference." So here's a painting of Hilton Smith. He told Satchel, "You don't want to hit one of those white guys, man, or we're going to have to leave here running. They'll hang us down here." Satchel said, "Okay, I'll do that." So he went back out there and wound up and came down with that long stride, big follow through. Chappie hit his fist in his mitt, and the umpire would yell, "Strike three!" That hitter was so mad. He threw his bat down. He yelled at the umpire, "You blind, Tom? And anybody would see who could see knows that the ball was high and outside." Those little white towns in the South were rough. The fans would call you everything. One lady brought us a black cake, had it delivered by a man in a white coat, right, written with icing from the top corner to the bottom corner at an angle was spelled NIG, etc. Now, why would somebody go through the trouble to do something like that? I guess you could call that dedication. Kids in those towns didn't know any better. They'd call you the N word before they'd say colored people because it was easier. And we couldn't talk back, fight back, or even run the score up too high. They might chase us out of there and we wouldn't get paid. It wasn't big money, but we needed it. You couldn't change those folks' minds anyhow. We were just a bunch of ball players. They were long set in their ways. There were white teams who traveled just as much as we did. Life on the road was rough, but wasn't as bad for them because they could stay where they played and didn't have trouble finding a meal. House of David was one of those teams. We played them quite often. They were a good ball team. They were from a religious colony out in the Benton Harbor, Michigan. Wore long hair and beards. The major leagues frowned on facial hair back then. There were a couple of knock-off House of David teams too. Sometimes they would hire major leaguers to play for them in the off season. They would wear false beards when they played, but they weren't fooling anybody. Even old Satch pitched a few innings for the colored House of David. We played major leagues quite often. When their season ended in October, they would barnstorm against us out in California and sometimes in Cuba. We played everybody from Ty Cobb to Babe Ruth. We won about 60% of the time. We hit them just the same as we hit our own pitchers. They had just as much trouble hitting Satchel as we did. That's how we knew we were good enough to play in the major leagues. There was never any problem on the field. We were friends with those guys. If there was a guy who didn't want to be bothered with us, then he just wouldn't play. The guys on the other team would come over after the game and tell us how good we were. Man, if we had a nickel every time we heard, if you were white, you'd be worth such and such. We'd all be rich, man. They knew we were just as good as they were. They respected us, and we respected them. A ball player is a ball player, and a good ball player are always up for a good game. And we'd give it to them. Besides, they made some good money playing against us. Back then, major leaguers didn't make all the money they make today. In the off season, they had to find a way of making a living. So here is a infielder from the House of David team. We had a good thing going playing the major leagues in the off season until Stan Musial, the St. Louis Cardinal slugger, put an end to it unintentionally. He was supposed to play with the Cleveland Indians pitching great Bob Feller on an all-star barnstorming team out in California. But Musial started late because the Cardinals were in the World Series. That year, the series went 7 games, and by the time Musial made it out to California, the Pacific Coast League had already started up. By the end of the season, he realized how much money he could have made had he been there the whole time, much more than he made in the World Series. He told people about it when he got home, and when Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, who was dead set against integration, caught wind of it, he made the rule that banned all Major League Baseball, who was dead Major League leaguers from barnstorming until the World Series was over. That Landis tried everything to stop those major leaguers from playing us. We were winning too many games, and he broke the whole thing up. Said something about the major league getting a black eye when we beat them. He cut back the number of games that they could play us and told them they couldn't wear their major league team uniforms. They had to call themselves all stars and play down our games as more exhibitions. Satchel Paige put together an all-star team and played major league pitchers Bob Fellers and J. Hannah Dizzy Dean's all-star teams. When people heard that Satchel Paige was going to be pitching against Dizzy Dean or Bob Feller, they would come, like we used to say, two to a mule. One year, Diz and Satchel filled Yankee Stadium for one of those exhibition games. They charged full price and made a killing. Sometimes Satchel was throwing so hard he wouldn't let their batters even touch the ball with the bat. And Feller and Dean, those boys would bring it too. As far as competition, I'd have to say we were about even. Only thing different was that they were a little more polished than we were, and those major league teams had deeper benches than we did. Negro League teams would only carry about 15 to 19 players at most, with about 6 pitchers. 2 good and the rest mediocre, and 1 good catcher. The majors would carry about 25 players, 6 or 7 good pitchers, and 2 good catchers. If we got hurt, well, then we just had to play hurt because there wasn't anyone to come in for us. We used to say We were paid for 9 innings, so we played for nine. But even with all that, we still won baseball games. I guess we beat those major leaguers as often as we did because we could outthink them. Baseball is a game of intelligence. For a long time, a lot of people thought Negroes could never play Major League Baseball because they thought we weren't smart enough. It took them a long time to realize that nothing was further from the truth. Those major leaguers learned a lot by playing us, and we learned a lot by playing them. They learned we were men just as they were, and they would shake our hands and look us in the eyes after we beat them, as did we. Maybe we did help change a few minds about playing baseball after all. And here's a painting of J. Hannah Dizzy Dean and Satchel Paige.